In August of 2013, two sisters, Sophia and Lily Evans, went on a short hike to Lake Marcy near Lake Placid, New York. They were to return in 3 days. Their tent was found near Indian Pass Creek, their gear neatly laid out, a map open, and the fire still warm. But the girls themselves were gone. 4 years later, a woman in tattered hiking clothes appeared on the side of the road near Saranac Lake. She introduced herself as Sophia Evans. Exhausted with scars on her arms, she kept repeating one thing: "Where is my sister?" In early August, the two sisters, 26-year-old Sophia Evans, a nurse practitioner from Albany, and her younger sister, 22-year-old Lily, an environmental studies student from New York City, set out on a short hike along the Van Hoevenberg Trail. It is one of the most popular hiking trails in the Adirondack Mountains, stretching from Lake Placid to the foot of Mount Marcy, the highest point in New York State. The sisters were supposed to return in 3 days. They were last seen on the afternoon of August 7th at the Mountaineer, a tourist shop in the town of Keene. The shopkeeper later told investigators that the girls were acting calm and had bought gas, batteries, and a new water filter. Sophia said they planned to spend a few days away from people and stay near Indian Pass Creek. That evening, she sent her mother a message with a photo. It showed Lake Marcy, quiet and shrouded in fog. It was the last sign of life from the Evans sisters. When they did not return home on August 9th, the family contacted the police. The next morning, a search team from the Department of Environmental Conservation, DEC, took the route the girls were supposed to have taken. Around noon, the rangers came across their camp near Indian Pass Creek. The picture seemed calm and yet disturbing. There were no signs of struggle or disorder. The tent was upright, the sleeping bags were laid out, the backpacks were open, but the things inside were still in place. Next to the fire was a torn red thread bracelet that, according to her mother, Lily had worn since childhood. The police took pictures of the place, restricted access, and began a thorough examination. There were no prints on the ground, only fuzzy shoe tracks that were lost a few yards from the camp. The rain that night had washed away most of the footprints. There were also no signs of animals or strangers. The sisters' phones were not in the camp, but their chargers were in their backpacks. It seemed they had just left the tent and never returned. The search operation began immediately. The next day, a DEC helicopter equipped with an infrared scanner took to the air to survey the Ampersand Mountain area. Dozens of volunteers, foresters, and dog handlers worked on the ground. They checked trails, valleys, and old hunting huts. Over the course of 5 days, they surveyed more than 30 square miles of mountainous terrain. At night, the rescuers set up beacons, hoping that the girls would see the light and come to the road. But no signals were received. On the 6th day of the search, they found only small traces: a plastic wrapper from an energy bar a mile away from the camp. Experts confirmed that the packaging was of the same brand as the one the sisters had bought at the Mountaineer store. But there were no fingerprints. Nearby, the dog picked up a trail that led to a gorge near a stream, but stopped at a cliff where the path broke off. On the 9th day, the search was called off. The Essex County Sheriff said in a statement that it is likely that the sisters got lost or had an accident. However, experienced hikers objected. The Van Hoevenberg route is not too difficult, and the weather was calm that day. There were no thunderstorms, avalanches, or landslides that could explain the disappearance. After 2 weeks, the operation was officially completed. The case was classified as a missing person. For the police, it was another tragic story of lost tourists who would never be found. But for the Evans family, it looked different. The girl's father, a former Albany firefighter, demanded that the search continue. He argued that the camp looked too sterile, as if someone had deliberately arranged things to give the impression of order. The mother insisted that Sophia would never have gone far without the map, which was found unfolded on a rock by the fire. But no amount of appeals helped. In October of 2013, The case was finally closed, and the names of Sophia and Lily Evans were added to the National Database of Missing Persons. Winter snows covered the site of their camp. Only local hunters passing by sometimes noticed strange things, traces of old campfires where no one was officially supposed to be, and, according to them, short screams in the night forest. But the police never returned to the site. Lake Placid, accustomed to tragedies in the mountains, silently added the two sisters to the long list of those whom the Adirondacks did not let back. Mark Grayson was not related to the Evans sisters, but he was closer to them than most friends. Sophia had once interned at the hospital at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, where Mark worked as a young electronics engineer. He helped her with her graduation project and later met Lily, the carefree ecology student who was always taking pictures of birds, even in the rain. When the news of their disappearance came in 2013, Mark went to Lake Placid immediately. At the time, he still believed that everything could be explained technically: a route error, a broken navigator, perhaps an accident. But when the search stopped, he couldn't return to his normal life. In December, he created a small website, something between a diary and a database called Find Evans Project. He collected all the open case materials on it: coordinates, DEC reports, testimonies of tourists. He was joined by his former classmates, programmer Sam, drone engineer Blake, and Geodesy student Sarah. They all agreed to come to the Adirondacks every summer to continue the search on their own. Mark called it an unclassical approach. In June of 2014, they set out on their first expedition. Instead of the usual binoculars and metal detectors, they used an old GPR that Mark had restored himself in the laboratory. They used it to check narrow caves and dips in the St. Ridge Mountains, an area where, according to local rumors, strange sounds like thumps or screams are often heard. The GPR showed underground cavities, natural and, in some places, suspiciously flat, as if created by humans. Mark marked them on a digital map that he collected on his server. The following summer, the team returned with a new experiment: a network of 12 cheap seismic sensors made from components from old gamepads. They placed them in different parts of the forest to hear how the earth breathes. When the wind was calm, the devices recorded strange short vibrations similar to rhythmic footsteps or metal hitting stone. Mark called it the mechanical heartbeat of the forest. Other members of the group thought it was the sound of wild animals or just a sensor error, but he disagreed. At the same time, they were working with satellite images. Mark wrote an algorithm that compared archival photos of the area over several years and identified small changes: spots of land where the soil color had changed, traces of old fires, and missing trails. The algorithm marked several areas that were not on the official maps of the park. One of them is a narrow valley near Ampersand Mountain, where hunters disappeared back in the 80s. The Essex County Sheriff was skeptical. Police reports stated, "Mark Grayson is not a law enforcement officer. His information cannot be considered reliable evidence." But he did not stop. He collected testimonies from locals, from old guides, foresters, campsite owners. Many told of strange screams at night, shadows on the slopes, and the smell of smoke in places where there were no tourists. One of the hunters, Harold Neal, said in a conversation with Mark, "Someone lives in those woods, not an animal or a man like us." In 2015, the team installed surveillance cameras in the trees near Indian Pass. Several of the recordings showed only animals passing by, but one nighttime shot showed a faint flicker in the distance, as if someone was moving with a lantern. When Mark tried to check the coordinates, he found only fresh campfire marks and a piece of cloth that had burned around the edges. The material matched the model of a backpack that was sold in the same store, the Mountaineer, in 2013. Every year, Mark went deeper into his search. He stopped teaching at the college and lived on grants and donations. His friends joked that he had married the forest, but he said, "Until I find them, I have no right to leave. In his apartment in Troy, there were boxes of hard drives with gigabytes of data maps, coordinates, reports, even audio recordings of forest noises. In the fall of 2016, he showed journalists his digital map of hotspots. It was a detailed visualization of all the recorded anomalies in the St. Regis area. Dozens of red marks flickered on the screen, most within a 5-mile radius of where the sisters disappeared. At the time, no one knew that it was there, among these markers, that the key to their fate lay. But Mark, looking at the shimmering map, told the journalist the words that would later be quoted in all the materials. "The forest remembers. It records everything. It just doesn't let us read it." On September 19th at 6:45 in the morning on the State Highway NY 86 near the town of Saranac Lake, a truck driver named Harold Mitchell noticed a woman walking along the side of the road. She was wearing tattered hiking clothes pants with burnt edges, a sleeveless jacket, and mud stains all over. She walked slowly, holding her shoulder hunched over, barefoot. Harold slowed down, thinking she was an injured hiker who had gotten lost. But as he got closer, he realized that the woman was barely responding to his approach. She was staring straight ahead and whispering, "Don't hurt, please don't hurt." Mitchell opened the cab door, wrapped her in a fleece blanket, and drove her to the nearest Franklin County Sheriff's Office. There she gave her name, Sophia Evans. The officer on duty initially thought he was dealing with a mentally ill woman or a homeless person. Sophia looked emaciated, with a haggard face, hair tied in knots, and deep scars on her forearms. But when she was taken to a nurse and questioned, she answered the questions in a way that left little doubt. On the identification sheet, Sophia handwrote the address of her apartment in Albany, 122 Madison Avenue, apartment 3. She listed her father's social security number, the names of her school friends, her sister's birthday, and described the kitchen in their home to the smallest detail. The blue clock above the stove, the shelf with the medicine cabinet, the peeling paint on the windowsill. Everything matched the description of the missing Sophia Evans, who had not been heard from for 4 years. The police contacted the Albany Police Department. The Evans family still lived there. A few hours later, the mother recognized her daughter from a photo taken at the police station. Her words were recorded in the report. "This is her. Oh my God, this is my Sophia." While the family was being officially notified, Sophia was taken to a hospital in the town of Malone. Doctors diagnosed severe exhaustion, dehydration, vitamin deficiencies, and numerous old scars on her body. She weighed a little over 100 pounds and could not keep her eyes open for long because of the light. According to the doctors, her body was in a state of chronic stress, typical of people who have spent years in separation or captivity. When asked where she had been, Sophia was silent at first. Then, a few days later, she said only one sentence, which was recorded in the report. "We thought they were hunters, but they are not from this world." The doctors decided not to press. Psychiatrist George Mason wrote in his conclusion, "The patient is in a state of deep traumatic amnesia. Her memory retains fragments of events, but she cannot connect them in a sequence." The first person to visit her was Mark Grayson. He learned about the woman from the woods from a local journalist and immediately went to the hospital. When he entered the room, Sophia was looking out the window, clutching a plastic mug of water. When she saw him, she said quietly, "You came." She recognized him, even though 6 years had passed since they last met. Mark recalled that her voice was quiet, as if broken, and her eyes were empty, like a person who had seen something that could not be explained. That evening, the police officially confirmed Sophia Evans' identity. A spokesperson for the Franklin County Department said, "The woman has been identified through DNA and family records. She is Sophia Evans, who disappeared in August 2013. Her condition is stable." The news quickly spread through the local media, with journalists calling it a return from the dead. However, the real questions were just beginning. 4 years in the wilderness with no documents, no trace of life, it seemed impossible. The police assumed that she could have fallen into a cult or been kidnapped. But no one explained how she survived without leaving a single trace behind. At the hospital, Sophia was transferred to a separate ward. There was a sign on the door that said, "No visits." At night, the nurses reported that she often woke up from nightmares, screaming, grabbing the wall as if she was running away from something. One of the dreams she described during psychotherapy involved people in skins and fire underground. Meanwhile, Sheriff Thomas Kelly, who had once closed the case, reopened it. He ordered an examination of old materials, including Mark Grayson's maps, which now took on a new meaning. The report stated, "The testimony of Sophia Evans, if confirmed, may indicate the existence of a group of individuals operating in the woods in the St. Ridge area." A few days later, journalists from New York appeared at the hospital. The reporters were waiting for at least one word, but Sophia was silent. Only to Mark she said, "I don't remember how I got out. I was just walking, and the forest ended." For the police, this was the beginning of a new investigation. For her, it was an attempt to return to a world where everything seemed artificial, loud, and alien. Sophia remained a living witness to what happened in the Adirondacks, but each of her scars spoke more than she did. For the first few days after her return, Sophia hardly spoke. She was afraid of the dark, asking to leave the lights on even during the day. Only after a week, when the doctors allowed her to have short meetings with a psychiatrist and an investigator, did she start to remember. Her voice was quiet and fragmented. The nurses called these sessions not interrogations, but confessions. She said that it all happened at night, in August 2013. She and Lily were about to go to bed when a noise came from the forest. Footsteps, hoarse voices. Then they heard a grunt, as if from an animal. Sophia came out of the tent thinking it was a deer, and at the same moment someone wearing a deer skull mask attacked her. The flashlight was snatched from her hands, and everything was drowned in darkness. She only managed to shout her sister's name. When she came to, they were already far away from the camp. Their hands and feet were tied with bark ropes. Around them were several figures in animal skins, their faces hidden under horned masks. Sophia could hear Lily praying softly. They were driven uphill through the dense forest for more than 2 hours. Finally, they were brought to a pit hidden under the roots of trees at the foot of an unnamed mountain. There, in the darkness, it smelled of dampness and earth. It was an underground shelter dug in clay with a ceiling supported by logs. They were kept there. Sophia said that at first she thought they were some crazy fans from a survivalist cult. But she quickly realized that these people were not just wild. They lived by their own laws, which they called purification. Their leader, a man named Elijah, had a former military build, straight spine, short hair, cold eyes. He said he had served at Fort Drum and saw people destroy themselves. Now, he said, it was time to return to nature, to the original balance. When asked why they chose the sisters, Elijah said, "You are a symbol of what the world has lost. Blood and lineage are the last things pure." Sophia did not understand what he meant until she saw their rituals. For several days, the prisoners were kept in a pit, given neither food nor water. Then they were forced to come to the surface. 10 people were standing near a large fire, men and women of all ages, all wearing the same skins, with symbols carved with knives on their hands. One of them was beating a drum made of deerskin. Another poured ashes into the fire. Elijah made a speech about cleansing the rot of civilization. Everyone had to go through pain to become a newborn. Sophia and Lily were forced to stand under a waterfall until their bodies lost all sensation. They were forced to remain silent by threatening them with knives. At night, according to Sophia, their hands were tied with wires, and they lay on the cold ground, listening to someone singing a monotonous melody somewhere nearby. They lived like a pack, Sophia said. They had their own signs, their own punishments. No one dared to speak unless Elijah said so. Everyone listened to him as if he were a god. When asked if she saw anyone outside, Sophia said, "There were two others. They were new. They were brought later from the south. They didn't come back either." The psychiatrist noted that her story was too clear in detail to be a hallucination. She described the smell of damp earth, the location of the pit, under a slope where the roots of trees intertwined to form a dome. She also mentioned a stream with reddish water flowing nearby. These details matched the actual geography of the St. Ridge Massif. When investigator Kelly asked about Lily, Sophia was silent for a long time. Then she said that her sister did not stand the ordeal. She was screaming, begging to be let go, and then they took her to the water. Elijah said that she would become part of the circle. Sophia never saw Lily again. After that, she stopped crying. She only repeated that Elijah taught his people not to kill for no reason, but to free souls from a corrupted world. He called their group the Forest Children. Sophia described how they lived. They slept in dug holes, ate berries, and sometimes hunted game. Their shelter was carefully disguised with branches and stones. The fire was made underground so that no smoke could be seen. Ropes with bones and feathers hung over the entrance to protect them from outsiders. Sophia's last memory before her escape is of a nightly gathering around the fire. Elijah spoke of a new purification, after which only those who are not afraid of the earth will remain. She realized that her turn was coming. That night, when the guard fell asleep, Sophia was able to untie the knot and escape. In the hospital, as she told this story, she was shaking, her hands clutching the blanket. The words were hard to come by, but each one sounded confident. When asked if she believed that Elijah was still alive, Sophia replied, "He's not dying. He's just going into the shadows." The investigators recorded every word. A large-scale operation was ahead, and the worst part was to check whether there really was a community of people in the Adirondacks who believed that the world should be cleansed with blood. After the first interrogations, Sophia was transferred to a separate ward with security. Her testimony became the main document in the case, but she herself resembled a person living between two realities. When the doctors gave her sedatives, she would sink into silence, and when the effect wore off, she would start whispering fragments of memories as if she was afraid someone would hear them. These fragments gradually formed a story that would later be called a survival diary. She said that after the first weeks of captivity, life in the Forest Children camp became like an endless ritual. Every day they forced her to undergo tests called purifications. One of them took place under the Owl Creek waterfall. A narrow stream of icy water fell from a cliff, and you had to stand under it until you lost consciousness. When a person fell, they were pulled out, rubbed with ashes, and called born again. Another test was hunger strike. Elijah said that hunger is a conversation between the body and the earth, and only those who endure hear the voice of the roots. Sophia recalled that they could not eat for several days, drinking only muddy water from the swamp. Some of them had symbols burned on their skin, a circle with a cross-section that resembled a sun torn in half. Metal rods were heated in a fire, and the smoke from the burnt meat was part of the ritual. Lily, her sister, was different. She was crying, arguing, demanding to be released. Sophia tried to calm her down, but Lily could not hide her despair. At night, as the wind swayed the trees above the pit, she whispered, "We have to run, even if we don't survive." A few days later, Lily tried. She escaped while the guards were sleeping, but she didn't get far. Sophia heard her scream somewhere in the woods, short and broken. Then Elijah appeared and silently ordered her out of the pit. The next morning, the group moved to a gorge they called Pocohama. There was a large boulder covered with moss, and under it was a stream of water flowing into a dark lake. Elijah said that she will return to the water from which we all came. She was tied to a rock and thrown into the water. Sophia did not see this. She was kept on her knees, forced to repeat the words of the vow. Purification has no pity. When she fell to the ground, the world became empty. After her sister's death, Sophia withdrew. She no longer cried, argued, or looked anyone in the eye. She realized that the only way to survive was to be invisible. She became submissive. She was allowed to carry water, clean her skin, and then pick berries. Years went by like that, without days and nights, without time. She lost track of the months. Sometimes Elijah would gather his followers around a fire and talk about a great circle that would soon close. He said that the world outside the mountains was already dead, and only those who remained in the forest would preserve the blood of the earth. Sophia didn't listen, but she remembered that new people were appearing among his people, young, silent, scared. She guessed that these were those who were kidnapped later. Some could not stand it and disappeared. Her escape was not a matter of courage, but of chance. It was September, the cranberry season. She was sent to pick berries in the swampy area of Bloomingdale Bog. She was accompanied by 2 guards, one of whom was young and often nervous. As they were crossing a swamp, the ground suddenly gave way. The young man disappeared into the swamp instantly, without even having time to scream. Another man rushed to help, and Sophia seized the moment. She threw the basket and ran without looking back. She ran until nightfall, then hid in the thickets. She ate moss, roots, and drank rainwater. Her body was exhausted, her legs were cut by stones, but fear drove her forward. She walked for several days, not knowing the direction, guided only by the sound of the road, which sometimes came from far away. When she finally made it out of the forest, the lights of the cars blinded her. She fell right on the side of the road near Saranac Lake. Later, in the hospital, she repeated that she did not remember walking those miles. Only one thing stuck in her mind, the sound of a drum that was heard somewhere behind her, long after she had run away. It beat a rhythm, slowly, like the heart of the earth that did not want to let go. For the investigators, it was the culminating moment. Sophia not only survived, but also confirmed the existence of a real community operating in the forests. When her words were compared with the data from Mark Grayson's map, it became clear that her path of escape had passed through the very places he called hotspots. That evening, when she told us about her sister's death, the room was completely silent. Sophia looked out the window and said only one thing. Lily did not drown. She stayed with them. The water took her in. A week after Sophia Evans appeared on the highway near Saranac Lake, the Franklin County Sheriff's Department announced the start of a special operation. The case, which was closed 4 years ago due to lack of evidence, suddenly got a new lease on life. Sophia's testimony, detailed with precise landmarks, names of streams, slopes, and even descriptions of smells, matched the data Mark Grayson had once collected in his digital map of hotspots. Mark arrives at the headquarters, set up in an old hangar near St. Regis. He brings a laptop, an external drive, and printed maps with his own markings, red dots, that he has been making over the years. When they compare them with the places Sophia mentioned in her confession, a striking correspondence is revealed. The dots overlap almost perfectly. Investigator Kelly orders the formation of 5 search teams. On September 24, 2017, at dawn, a convoy of jeeps sets off in the direction of the St. Ridge Mountains. They include dog handlers, forensic experts, sappers, 2 geologists, and Mark himself as a consultant. The forest greets them with fog and cold. The branches are covered with frost, and the ground under their feet springs as if hiding something alive. The first hours of the search are fruitless. But at noon, one of the groups comes to the place where, according to Sophia, there was a talking waterfall, Oak Creek. As they approach it, the dogs start to get nervous, and the smell of burning is in the air. Under the rock, behind the thickets, they find a hole about 10 feet in diameter, fortified with logs. Inside are the remains of wooden supports, burnt branches, pieces of leather, and a clay vessel with dried black sludge. A few yards from the pit is a stone circle made up of dozens of boulders. Some have soot marks, others have knife marks, as if meat had been cut on them. There are ashes, animal bones, and a rusty knife on the ground. Criminologists record every detail. The photos are sent to the headquarters, and when Sophia is shown one of them at the hospital, she recognizes the place immediately. That's where we stood at night. That's where the cleanup started. 200 yards from the circle, they find a dilapidated dugout. The entrance is disguised by branches and moss. Inside, there are wooden remains of flooring, food, bones of small animals, and a knife-carved sign on the wall. A circle divided in half, the same one described by Sophia. Above the entrance hang masks made of deer skulls, 2 large ones, 1 smaller. There is dried blood on the antlers. Experts also found traces of everyday life: old metal mugs, canisters, fragments of military uniforms with tags where you can still read part of the name: Graves. This was the name of the man Sophia called Elijah. The next day, an additional unit arrives in the area, a Special Forces unit from Albany. The area around Old Creek is sealed off. Journalists are not allowed in. The operation is codenamed Silent Ridge. The task is to find the remaining accomplices and any traces of human remains. On the 3rd day of the search, they notice smoke in one of the gorges. When they get there, they find an abandoned camp, 3 huts made of logs, and a large fire that someone tried to put out in a hurry. Near the fire are old boots, cans of canned food, and an Army-issued children's helmet. In the ashes are remnants of fabric, pieces of metal, and a wooden idol, a figure with a human face covered in dried resin. The photographs are sent to a laboratory where experts determine that the resin contains particles of human blood. This is no longer just the remains of a shelter, but a place of ritual. That evening, the investigators compare the data. Mark's map and Sophia's testimony form a triangle between Oak Creek, Bloomingdale's Bog, and Lake Tyrol. Within this triangle, several other anomalies are recorded: fresh excavations, unburned fires, and traces of heavy objects being transported. This indicates that the group could have existed here for years. During the search of one of the huts, they find an old Army canteen with the letters EG engraved on it. It contains a dried liquid with a pungent odor. Chemical analysis shows that it is a mixture of alcohol and ash, one of the components used in the purification rituals. The sheriff's report states, "The site appears to have been abandoned for no more than a few months. Some fires are still fresh, and shoe prints of various sizes were found in the ground. This means that part of the group could have remained in the woods even after Sophia's escape." Mark, who was standing near the dug hole, told the journalist that he had come to the site to make sure that this was a reality, not his obsessive hypothesis. His words were included in the final report. What we were looking for as a digital anomaly turned out to be a real center of evil. The forest was silent, but we heard its echoes. After a week of work, the area was completely examined. More than 100 pieces of evidence were collected: bone fragments, tissue, soil samples. Part of it was sent to a laboratory in Albany, the rest to the FBI. Officially, it was stated that elements that may indicate the commission of ritual murders were found. The operation in St. Ridge was completed on October 1st. It became one of the largest search and crime expeditions in the history of the Adirondacks. For the locals, it was the moment when the legends of the forest children ceased to be legends. That evening, when the convoy of vehicles was heading back, a small fire was still burning on the mountainside. No one had put it out. The flame was reflected in puddles and reminded us that even when evil retreats, the forest keeps its breath. The first days of October 2017. Autumn in the Adirondack Mountains comes quietly. The air becomes thicker, the water colder, and the leaves sink in their own shadows. It was then that divers from the Department of Environmental Protection began surveying Lake Tyrol, a small body of water in the St. Ridge Mountains that Sophia mentioned in her confession. According to her, it was there that her sister's life ended. On October 4th, at 9 o'clock in the morning, a group of 4 divers took to the water. The lake was shallow, only a few dozen feet at its deepest point, but the bottom was covered with silt and thick algae. Within an hour of starting the work, one of the divers came across a dark shadow in the silt. When he lifted it up with his flashlight, a human skull peeked out from under the layer of algae. Next to it were fragments of cloth and a rope stretching to a large boulder. The ascent lasted several hours. A partially preserved skeleton, the remains of clothing and metal clasps from a backpack were brought ashore. When forensic experts cleaned the bones from the silt, it became clear that there were rope fibers on the shins and wrists, tightened tightly like handcuffs. Sheriff Thomas Kelly was working at the scene. In his statement, he said, "We're not making any conclusions, but all indications are that this is a ligature before drowning." The samples were sent for DNA testing to a laboratory in Albany. 3 days later, on October 7th, the results confirmed that the remains belonged to Lily Evans. The match analysis was 100%. Sophia, upon learning this, silently turned over the sheet with the results, only whispering, "She is here after all." This discovery was a turning point for the investigation. For the first time, the police had not only testimony, but also indisputable proof of the murder. On the initiative of the district attorney, the case was transferred to a special team in Syracuse that dealt with religious groups and crimes in natural parks. All the evidence collected, bones, pieces of rope, army tags with the name E. Graves, were put together into a single chain. At the same time, the FBI released a sketch of the man Sophia described as Elijah. He had short hair, high cheekbones, and a scar across his eyebrow. The photo was published in all local media. Within days, the police began to receive dozens of calls. Some claimed to have seen him in Plattsburgh, others near an old sawmill in the north. Not a single trace was confirmed. The situation changed on October 12th. In the small town of Tupper Lake, a man tried to buy large-caliber ammunition at the Mountain Dick Outfitters hunting store. The shopkeeper was alerted. The customer looked dirty, had torn hands, and was looking around nervously. When he was asked to show his ID, he ran away. A few minutes later, he was detained nearby. The report reads, "Tobias Reed, 39 years old, former mechanic from North Carolina, no fixed abode. He was carrying a knife, a piece of rope, and a homemade medallion with a carved symbol, a circle divided in half. It was the same pattern that was found in the camp near Old Creek." During interrogation, Reed remained silent at first. Then, after several hours of pressure, he admitted that he knew Elijah. According to him, they met back in 2012 when he preached about cleansing the city of garbage. Elijah gathered a few people around him, homeless people, former soldiers, those who had lost their way. He promised them a new life in the forest, where there is no lie of civilization. Reed admitted that he helped build the underground pit and transported the prisoners' belongings. When asked about the Evans sisters, he replied, "He said they were clean, that they would become water. I didn't ask what that meant." His words coincided with Sophia's account of Lily's death. Divers had already been working at the spot he described, the Pokogama Gorge, and they found the body. Reed became the main witness for the prosecution, although he was formally an accomplice. His arrest was the first success of the operation. The following days were spent working feverishly. Investigators checked all the addresses where Elijah Graves could be hiding. According to the FBI, he served at Fort Drum, was a sergeant who was discharged in 2010 after a disciplinary offense. His psychiatric report mentioned paranoid beliefs about the moral decay of society. The search lasted 3 weeks. Graves was seen in different neighborhoods, in bars, at gas stations, on the side of the road. All reports turned out to be false until on November 27th, the patrol came across an old logging camp between Middle and Upper Saranac Lake. There, in an abandoned building, among the remains of canned food and army supplies, they found a sleeping bag with a rifle and a deer skull mask. Nearby were traces of a fresh fire. In the evening, when the police were combing the area, shots were heard. A short firefight ensued. When it died down, they found a wounded man in the bushes, bearded, thin, with a cut on his face. His documents confirmed that he was Elijah Graves. His condition allowed him to speak. When asked why he did it, he replied, "You call it a crime. I call it purification. The forest takes those whom we are not worthy to return." The next morning, he was taken to the hospital under guard. Sophia was the last to be informed. She didn't say anything. She just looked out the window, where the forest stretched beyond the glass, the same forest that took her sister and 4 years of her life. Elijah Graves's trial began in December, just 3 weeks after his arrest. The case, which once seemed hopeless, now had a name, a face, and irrefutable evidence. The New York State Attorney General's office declared the trial a priority criminal proceeding to keep the public outcry alive. The Franklin County courtroom was packed. Journalists, relatives of the missing, and several former searchers all wanted to see the man the forest had been hiding for 4 years. Graves sat motionless in prison clothes, with his hair cut short and his eyes expressionless. His face, gaunt and emaciated, seemed to be devoid of time. When asked by the judge about his guilt, he answered briefly, "I did what I had to do." The prosecutor presented evidence: DNA from Lily's grave, rope remnants, symbols on stones, and a matching set of shoe prints. But the main witness was Sophia. She was sitting in the hall with a white scarf around her neck, looking in front of her and trying not to meet his eyes. Her testimony lasted almost 2 hours. She spoke about the night of the abduction, about the pit under the trees, about the rituals, and about the death of her sister. The judge asked for a break several times. When the prosecutor asked her if she was sure that it was Elijah Graves, Sophia answered quietly but firmly. I could hear his voice even when the forest was silent. At that moment, the room fell absolutely silent. The defense tried to prove that the defendant was mentally ill. The lawyer read out old military certificates, post-traumatic stress disorder, episodes of delirium, isolation. But the prosecutor insisted that all Graves's actions were conscious and consistent. He planned the kidnapping, controlled his accomplices, left symbols, creating a system he believed in. It was not blind rage, but religious fanaticism turned into a crime. Among the evidence presented to the court were journals found in the camp. In them, Graves's handwriting included excerpts from his own sermons. Man is a disease. The earth heals itself through purification. The judge quoted these lines in the verdict, calling them the manifesto of a self-proclaimed Messiah. On January 2nd, 2018, the jury announced the verdict. Elijah Graves was found guilty of the kidnapping, murder of Lily Evans, and the unlawful detention of her sister. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His accomplice, Tobias Reed, who cooperated with the investigation, was sentenced to 25 years. After the verdict, Sophia left the courtroom without a word. She did not speak to journalists, but only went out into the courtyard of the court, where the first snow was falling. Later, one of the reporters described her face as calm but empty, as if she was looking through us into a forest that was no longer there. A few weeks later, she moved to Vermont, to a small town near Burlington. There she began working at a clinic for veterans, the same ones who, like Elijah, had once returned from war not quite alive. Her colleagues said she didn't speak much, but she always stayed close when someone woke up screaming in their sleep. Mark Grayson returned to Troy after the trial. His map of the hotspots was now stored in the police archive as official evidence. For him, the story ended not with victory, but with exhaustion. In an interview with a local newspaper, he said, "I wasn't looking for a monster. I was looking for people. And I found them, but too late." In the spring, he closed the Find Evens Project website. The last entry was simple: "We found them. Let the forest be silent." Graves' case was entered into the Federal Register as an example of religiously motivated crimes in closed ecosystems. But even after the verdict, there was a feeling that the story was not over. During his final statement, standing before the judge, Elijah suddenly raised his head and said, "You can lock the body, but not the forest. It always hears." These words went into the record, and a year later, someone wrote them on a wooden sign near the Indian Pass Trail. The police did not find out who did it. The locals just started avoiding the trail.